Hello again, good evening, and welcome back to another episode of Minds on Guard, where we're learning how to guard our minds against all of the manipulations, attacks, and attempts at thought and behavior control that we come under today in the 21st century. In tonight's video, we need to talk about something that's fundamental to how the world around us operates. Something that has been in play for over 2 centuries, yet many people have never even heard of it. It's a process, a method that has been used time and time again to reshape entire societies, shift public opinion, and manipulate human thought on a mass scale. It affects you, it affects me, and it's been a major driving force behind some of the greatest societal changes in history. And yet, most of us don't even realize when it's being used against us. I'm talking about the Hegelian dialectic. This concept, developed by the German philosopher Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, has been utilized by world leaders, policymakers, revolutionaries, and social engineers to craft a new reality by controlling the conflict that gets us there. Tonight, we're going to break this down into 3 parts. First, we'll introduce the Hegelian dialectic, what it is, why it's so powerful, and why it remains relevant today. Second, we'll contrast Hegel's method with another dialectic, the Socratic method, which is a system of logic that leads us closer to truth rather than through manipulation. And third, we'll begin to explore the problem-reaction-solution framework with an emphasis on how the Hegelian dialectic is weaponized to manufacture consent for predetermined outcomes that the ruling or elite class desires. We will use what we learn here to continue into more depth in upcoming videos, so I hope you enjoy this study. Before we go any further, let's start by defining a key term that will be foundational to this discussion. That's dialectic. A dialectic is a method of reasoning and argumentation where opposing ideas are examined in order to arrive at greater understanding. At its core, it's a framework for discourse, one that challenges, refines, and ultimately transforms knowledge and thought through the clash of opposing viewpoints. The word itself comes from the Greek dialektike, meaning discussion or debate. Historically, dialectical reasoning has been a tool for discovering truth, and it's used by philosophers to challenge assumptions, expose contradictions, and refine ideas through logical discourse. But not all dialectics function in the same way or even serve the same purpose. Hegel's dialectic is a framework for understanding how history progresses, not necessarily in a straight line, but through a series of conflicts. He proposed that every major shift in thought or society happens in 3 stages. Now, while there's a popular way to look at this concept, it should be noted that Hegel never actually used the terms in which the dialectic is commonly discussed himself. Later philosophers simplified his work to achieve a more easily understood progression of discourse, yet the core is still preserved from the original. The most commonly used framework is 1. The thesis, an idea or an existing order, a current way of life. 2. The antithesis, a conflicting idea or an opposing force or a crisis that destabilizes the thesis. And then 3 is synthesis, a new resolution, a new normal that emerges from the conflict, creating a transformed order. Hegel's work was not about neutral observation. He wasn't just pointing out that history moves through conflict. He was suggesting that conflict should be used as a tool to achieve specific ends. Now let's consider an example. If we think about the French Revolution, we can identify the 3 components of the Hegelian dialectical structure and learn some things about how it creates change in reality. The thesis in the French Revolution was the monarchy and the aristocracy, the traditional ruling structure of France. The antithesis was revolution, the uprising of the lower classes against that order. And the synthesis was the rise of a new, centralized power, eventually leading to Napoleon's dictatorship and later a cycle of new authoritarian rule in France. Now here's the key question that we need to ask. Was all of this a natural process, or was it engineered somehow? Hegel's ideas gained serious traction in the 19th and 20th centuries, particularly among political elites, revolutionaries, and globalist organizations that understood one thing. If you can control both the thesis and the antithesis, you can steer the synthesis toward your desired outcome. You don't have to wait for history to unfold. You can make it happen. When viewed in this way, we see how the original core ideas of Hegel's dialectic are able to be co-opted into a system which harnesses the power of creating controlled opposition to achieve desired change. Now, let's bring this into today. When we look around, every major societal shift, every dramatic transformation of norms follows this same pattern. Governments and powerful interests create and control conflicts so that they can offer the pre-planned solution that consolidates their power. Every time a crisis emerges, we have to ask, who benefits? But before we get into how this is used to engineer consent through problem-reaction-solution, we need to take a step back and compare this to a different kind of dialectic, one that seeks to reveal truth rather than further manipulation. Not all dialectics are created equal. Hegel's dialectic of conflict isn't the only model of reasoning. If we go back to ancient Greece, we find a very different kind of dialectical method, the Socratic method. The Socratic dialectic was named after Socrates, and it was built on inquiry, discussion, and the pursuit of truth through logical reasoning. Here's how it worked. Instead of forcing a collision of two opposing ideas to generate a desired outcome, Socrates would ask questions, probing, testing, and refining ideas through dialogues. The goal was to eliminate contradictions, not to create them. It required intellectual humility, meaning the ability to recognize when one was wrong and to change accordingly. Now we can contrast this with Hegel's dialectic, which thrives on contradiction rather than eliminating it. Where the Socratic method moves toward truth, the Hegelian method moves toward power. Where Socratic reasoning seeks understanding, the Hegelian conflict model seeks control. If the Socratic method is the pathway to enlightenment, then Hegel's method is the mechanism of revolution and subjugation. Which brings us to the most important aspect of how the Hegelian dialectic is used in the modern world, the problem-reaction-solution formula. Here is the formula that has played out over and over again throughout world history. First, create a problem by initiating and exploiting a real or manufactured crisis. Next, manufacture a reaction, fomenting mass amounts of fear, outrage, and division. And then finally, offer a pre-planned solution by implementing a policy, a law, or a new order that would not have been accepted before the crisis. Let's break this down with a few real-world examples. The Patriot Act, as it was introduced after the September 11th attacks on New York and Washington, D.C. The problem: the September 11th attacks created a state of fear and crisis. The reaction: the public demands new and more thorough methods of security driven by the fear and desperation to prevent another attack. The solution: the Patriot Act, a sweeping government surveillance bill that would have never been accepted under normal conditions. So what was the outcome? Mass surveillance, indefinite detention policies, and the erosion of civil liberties, all in the name of security. This sets up systems which have only become more sophisticated and ubiquitous, as well as a continual justification for the ever-expanding reach of citizen surveillance in the modern world. Next, the various global financial crises. The problem? A financial collapse, often triggered by reckless policies or banking failures. The reaction? Public panic caused by loss of retirement, savings, and value of traditionally stable assets, excessive unemployment, and high demand for economic stability. The solution? Bailouts for financial institutions, devaluing of currencies through inflation of the money supply, and further centralized economic control. So who wins? Well, it's the international banking cartel and their respective representatives in the private sector. Those who behaved criminally avoided all accountability and are provided even more resources to continue the same games into the future. Last, we have the ongoing advancements of the digital control grid. The problem? A global pandemic, continual cyber attacks, or looming climate emergency. The reaction? Governments and media manufacture mass fear and urgency to contain the fallout. People demand quick fixes to address the fears that are manufactured through narrative creation and information control. The solution? Digital ID systems, tracking of citizens' behavior, and further restrictions on personal freedoms to think, say, and question reality, all under the pretense of preventing the spread of disease, protecting the weak members or systems of a society, or averting an existential threat which threatens the life and existence of the entire world. Each time the new solution erodes liberties, consolidates control, and centralizes power in the hands of a select few who are primed to start the cycle of conflict over, using new dialectics to gain even more control over resources. Once you recognize the Hegelian dialectic at play, you can start to see it everywhere around you, both in macro and micro versions. Conflict is being used as a tool every day, not to solve problems, but to steer society toward predetermined outcomes that favor those who are already in power. So what do? We must learn to ask the right questions. We must reject false dichotomies. We must recognize controlled opposition for what it is, and we must learn to love the truth above all else. The battle for our minds is real, and the best weapon against it is clarity of thought, sober discernment, and the continual pursuit of truth. So until next time, stay safe, stay diligent, and stay vigilant, keeping your minds on guard.